There we
Oh,
go.
awesome. Hey, Trey,
Hey, John. You have
how
your
are you?
wines open? I'm good. I'm good. We got a perfect day here. So full sun, fog burned off at 10, a lot of wind to dry out the vines. So doing good. How about yourself?
Fabulous. Couldn't be any better.
Good.
Couldn't be any better.
Good.
Um, weather's nice too. It's fantastic.
Yeah, we've got pretty good weather. So this is kind of like prime prime time for mildew season in the vineyard. So we're just trying to stay really vigilant and make sure that we keep opening up the canopy and get lots of wind and sunshine in there.
Good. I think we have people in our living room with us, right?
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Trey Fletcher. I'm the winemaker from Sanford. So thanks for joining us. And we have special guest, John Terlato, vintner and proprietor, Terlato family of Sanford Vineyards as well. So thanks for joining me again, John.
We always have fun doing this together, Trey. I enjoy it. Thanks for taking the time, and it gives I feel as if it gives us the opportunity to talk to our friends and our followers about what it is that we're trying to accomplish at Sanford and the work that we do. I thought about this. Somebody asked me, why do you spend time doing this? What's going on? I said, I love it. My favorite thing is when people, friends visit the wineries and we host them there and we can walk them through and they can feel and touch things. It's very tactile. But the alternative is if we don't have people who are visiting the winery and we're doing some type of a webinar that you and I are trying to bring people to Sanford so that they have a sense of what we're doing there, right? I enjoy these seminars because it gives you and I the opportunity to talk to people about what we're doing. So it's fun. It's fun for me. It's fun for me.
Yeah, me too. Hey, it looks like Tammy's got the 4D and the Vista Al Rio, so good job, Tammy. We've got that too. And
Great.
we'll start off on the Vista Al Rio. Do you have the Vista Al Rio open?
I do. And by the way, I'm watching, so this is a little bit of my ADD as I see, the names of people popping up. Oh, look, there's a
Hey,
bird.
Marisa.
Yeah, there's Marisa Taylor, winemaker at Rutherford Hill. Thanks for joining us. Michael Benedict just joined us, founder of the Sanford and Benedict Vineyard, often considered and spoken of as the father of winemaking in Santa Barbara County, having planted the Sanford and Benedict Vineyard in 1971, when there really were no other Pinot Noir vineyards planted anywhere nearby. A family member, Linda Collison. Hi, Linda. Thanks for joining us. It's nice when you have family support you because, sometimes we need the extra support. So thanks for joining us, Linda. Appreciate you being there. So, Trey, I have both wines open. I've got the Vista Al Rio and the 4D. Do you want to launch us off here and talk a little bit about the wines?
Yeah, so I'm at Sanford right now, so I can see the vineyard block Vista Al Rio out my window right now, and it's getting hit with lots of wind and lots of sun. And we'll pull up a map right now so you guys can see what we're talking about and where we are in California exactly. And we're in the vineyard, but Vista Al Rio for me is it's usually one of the first Pinot Noir vineyards that we pick, and that is because it doesn't set very much crop. It's a really low yielding block with really just a challenging environment. It's incredibly rocky, and it's essentially the first Pinot Noir on the property that gets hit with the wind from the Pacific, and I think that comes through in the wine. And
there's the block map.
There we go.
Point
and
out
you can see that the block that we're tasting right now, and this is a block designate, is from right there at R21, which is right up on the first hill that the wind encounters on our property. And it's a small 4-acre block, all Pinot Noir. Incredibly rocky soils, planted to a selection of Pinot Noir that's known for doing pretty well in challenging circumstances or good circumstances, 667. And it's on a rootstock that allows us to have a little more vigor and a little more power to allow those struggling shoots to get out in a windy area. And so
Also, Anthony Trelato, Tony Trelato just joined us. That's my father. Hi, Dad.
Hey, Tony.
Thanks for joining us. Patriarch of the Trelato family, visionary. Had this idea, 70-something years ago to get involved in the wine business, and he's been a passionate advocate of fine wine for all of his life. And if I say something semi-intelligent, you can thank my dad, and if it's not as intelligent as it should be, you could blame the fact that maybe I wasn't listening as carefully as I should be. But do remember, this is important. The more wine you all drink, the more intelligent we sound. So we encourage consumption of wine so that all of this will sound interesting and engaging. Welcome, Dad. Glad you could join us. So sorry, Trey, didn't mean to interrupt. We were talking about R21 and the soil conditions, and that's the upper part of the vineyard, right? The one that's...
Yeah, let me go to the next slide and you'll be able to see how it sits. And so R21 Vista Al Rio is this little knoll that's on the other side of the screen there, just to the right of the trees. And it doesn't look very steep or exposed in this picture, but if we were standing in that block, we could look straight out to the Pacific, and a very, very windy spot. And if you taste the Vista Al Rio, and then we go to the next slide, and you can actually see what the soil and the vineyard block looks like and the grapes look like. It smells kind of like the ocean. It's got, beautiful fruit, beautiful Pinot Noir character, but it's got lots of those, sea breeze, saline, umami characters aromatically that I just love. Lots of black tea, lots of citrus, and lots of nori.
So, Trey, I'd like to talk a little bit. We've been doing these now for, 60 days. We've been doing these seminars together, and we're trying to express to, our friends and followers what it is that we're trying to do with the vineyard. I had some questions after our last webinar about block wines and single vineyard wines, and I wanted to take the opportunity to express and explain a little bit about what we're trying to do, and then we're going to jump into the next wine, because I would like you to describe these in a little bit more detail for our followers. So, look, it's no surprise to people that I've become a passionate follower, advocate, consumer of Burgundian wines, and I felt as if our family are the stewards of this iconic, important vineyard. It's been written about as one of the 5 most important vineyards in California. So we have a responsibility to be stewards of the land and care for this land and hand it over to the next generation in better condition than we found it. And at the same time, I've spent, the last 15 years tasting wines in Burgundy. And when somebody asked me about single block wine, why we do, and the question was, aren't single block wines just, a marketing ploy to extract more dollars from consumers and produce wines that are more scarce? And I wasn't surprised at the perspective, and so I wanted to talk about what we're trying to do. So if you think about what the Burgundians have been doing, they started growing grapes and making wine back in, I think it was 1100, and maybe it was a little beyond that. I know Clos Vougeot was walled in 1300 by the Cistercian monks.
It was a while ago.
It was a while ago. So the Cistercian monks then spent something like 700 years experimenting with the different soils that existed within Burgundy, and they really only had two alternatives. They had Chardonnay or they had Pinot Noir. This was before clones. This was before rootstock, and they were doing Massal selection. They were taking cuttings from the most healthy looking vines and the most productive vines, and they were planting those cuttings to create more vines, which created a wide range of what we would call clonal selection a broad, diverse range of clonal selection. And they spent 700 or 800 years experimenting with different plantings, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, different locations. And then when Dr. Jules Lavelle did the classification of Burgundy, and the monks, by the way, had been writing down all of their findings as they found another vineyard and they made another wine, and it was higher quality than the previous vintage, and they would document and write down all of this information. And when Dr. Lavelle did his classifications, it was a really almost a precise replication of the notes and the findings of the monks over 700 years. So after having learned all that through tastings and making friends in Burgundy and coming back to our vineyard, I thought, how could we better understand this site? Right, we have all these different vineyard blocks, different clones, different Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, different rootstocks. How could we launch trials to better understand the site? And when you and I find,
we don't have 700 years.
We don't have 700 years. I'm a man in a hurry. I don't mind saying that I'm a man in a hurry. I don't have 700 years to figure this out, nor do you. And so Trey and I are experimenting with these blocks to try and figure out what do we have here. But here's what I can say, with 100% certainty. As Trey and I are experimenting with our farming techniques and when we pick and fermentation and versus pump over and finding a great expression, he and I talk about us being philosophically aligned. We will never bottle a single block wine unless we believe that it is truly unique and representative of a place.
Oh yeah, yeah, and we don't. It's not a real challenge when we have the three tiers or those three concentric circles, starting with the Santa Rita Hills Pinot Noir, and then getting down to the Sanford and Benedict La Rinconada, and then like the wines we're tasting now, which are block designates, really small parcels of La Rinconada and Sanford and Benedict vineyard. It's because through trial and error in the 40 plus years that we've been making wines off of these properties, it's these blocks just speak to you, and they just have a little more to say, and the conversation's a little more rounded out when they say it, compared to some others. And it's just through that time, of growing the grapes and making the wines and following them through élevage and tasting, and it's kind of like, oh, there's something here that's just a little more. And it's very much like raising children, just kind of seeing what's gonna shine and what's gonna work, for sure.
Yeah, and so maybe you can translate that into these two block wines that we have in front of us. Obviously you and I both feel that they're unique enough to be bottled, picked, fermented, vinified, and barrel aged separately, and that they're a true expression of a place, an individual block, one being Vista Al Rio, the other being 4D. Maybe you can talk about the differences in these two wines, Trey, so that our friends and followers understand why we chose to bottle these separately. Yeah. Right? Can you do that a little bit, maybe?
Yeah. First, to answer Don Walton's question, how's Augie? Augie, our longtime cellar master, is great. He and Laura tasted these wines with me about 20 minutes before we sat down to this, so he's doing really good. But to get back to that, so Vista Al Rio, the first Pinot Noir, it's a very rocky site, and it's a site that ripens up quickly, as I mentioned before, but the second that it goes into tank and you're tasting the juice, it's a little more darker, it's a little more expressive, it's a little more spicy, and it's got that acidity. If you can taste the acidity in the Vista Al Rio, which is very prominent, part of that is because it's in such a cold area, so the grapes hold on to the acidity more. It gives you a wine that's really soft and very elegant and very complete. And it doesn't necessarily play well with others, as well as it works as a lone wolf, so to speak. And so we have two sections of this block, a lower section and an upper section that we pick at different times because the soils are a little different and they ripen a couple of days apart. and it's this upper section.
Trey, Laura Jensen, one of our followers, is asking if we could see the block map again as we're talking about this. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You're on a roll.
No, I almost went full stream of conscious. The R21 is right in the center of that picture, and it's kind of a long block, and that's because of how the hillside is shaped. And so we picked that lower section and that upper section separate, and it's the same Pinot Noir planted throughout the block, but because of those two different soil types, it makes a wine that tastes very different. And so that upper section goes into Vista Al Rio, because over time we found that paints a complete picture. It's a full conversation. It's kind of like a full being, and you know it when you taste it. And that's not a very great answer, but that's how we figure it out in the vineyard and the cellar. Whereas the lower part of that block, that same block, goes into La Rinconada, and that's because that part of the block makes a very beautiful Pinot Noir that tells kind of, you know, maybe more of a part of a story, and it does play well with others, and so we can blend that lower section with a couple other blocks. But this is tasting great. I love the really fine tannins. I love the length of it. I love how the acidity makes me a little thirsty and a little hungry, and makes me want to come back. It's not work to enjoy this wine, and it definitely tastes of the place that it comes from, which is very cold, very windy, and very rocky.
Yeah, so I think that articulation that you just shared, Trey, about the top versus the bottom. You know, look at if this whole idea of, you know, single block wines was a bunch of hooey and maybe just some, you know, marketing brilliance, we would bottle the entirety of that block as one expression. But we know that there's kind of a Mason-Dixon line in that block where we say, okay, the fruit above this line really deserves to be alone. It's unique enough. It's complete enough. As you said, Trey, it's a lone wolf. It wants to be by itself. It doesn't really need, you know, other friends in the sandbox. And we taste those wines, and we're watching the maturation of those grapes and when they get picked. And so now you've got this upper and lower block. They're picked at separate times. They're maturing at different rates. And we say, okay, this block needs to be alone because it deserves to be alone. But this lower portion of the block really plays well in the sandbox with other people, and it helps us when we're blending wines, when we're blending the Rinconada, you know, single vineyard wine, that the lower portion of the block adds a great amount of complexity and character and depth and tannic structure to the blend, which we call the La Rinconada Pinot Noir blend, right? So
yeah, totally different wine. And
yeah,
so that's how you make two different wines from, you know, just because it's a block, it's not set in stone. That was the way that the soil seemed like it wanted to be planted, and that's the direction the tractor goes. And so that's how the rows went. And but over time we found that just because the tractor went that way, the wine doesn't always go that way, and we pick it in two different spots, two different times, and it goes into two different wines. And James Kennedy, yes, Santa Rosa Road is at the top of that map. That's correct. And
Laura Jensen's asking a question about, on behalf of Barbara Miller, who's asking if the grapes from these blocks taste the same each vintage. So I'm assuming that she wants to know if the grapes from block 4D taste the same from vintage to vintage, and then the grapes from the Vista Al Rio, the R21, taste the same from vintage to vintage. I'm interpreting the question a little bit.
Yeah, and that's an easy question. They certainly don't. Thank goodness. And the 16s that we're tasting right now, and I think Tammy said she was drinking an 09. Is that right, Tammy? The 16 vintage was a really cool vintage, and so you get a lot of the darker characters, and the vintage holds on to more of the acidity, and you get a lot more of the spice elements, and the wine works itself out in a different way. The 17, which we don't have open right now, but is a much warmer vintage, and so the fruit that you get, the characters, the level of acidity, and the structure of the wine is going to be totally different. And good reason to put a different year on the bottle, right?
Yeah, so we should talk about that too. You know, Trey, look, at you and I both believe that when Mother Nature provides us with a fantastic, growing season and the perfect conditions, it's certainly easier for us to farm, and it's certainly maybe a little less challenging to get the fruit to the right kind of ripeness at the right moment and have, tannic structure, phenolic ripeness, and sugar accumulation, cross and we pick. In the difficult vintages, there's a saying in the wine business, in the difficult vintages, the great farmers win. All right.
Yeah, and they should, right? That's
Yeah.
what we're doing, and the grape farmer, that I'm interpreting that as you're meaning, like, I'm not just sitting at the winery doing Excel spreadsheets all day waiting for the grapes to arrive because I told the guy to pick it. It's the interaction of being in the vineyard throughout the season, farming, making decisions throughout the season, and manipulating in the vineyard, and being able to rest on those decisions once the grapes get to the winery because the work's been done there.
Yeah, I mean, look at 90 to 95% of our work is in the vineyard during growing season and farming, and if we do our work well during the growing season, then the grapes come to the crush pad, at some level complete. Really, I mean, that's what we're shooting for. We don't want to have to do a lot of chemistry and science in the winery. If we're really truly making wines that are representations and reflections of a place, there should be very little chemistry. Right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I got a degree in chemistry, and I'm sure all my enology and viticulture professors would be super bummed out to hear it. But we're trying to do everything right in the vineyard, and so we don't have to monkey around in the cellar. Because what are we doing if we're doing that? Do you want to taste the 4D, John?
Yeah, absolutely.
I haven't poured mine yet.
I want to answer. My dad is asking a question, and I'm looking for a little clarification. Right there we go. Looking for a little clarification from him. He was saying what a great explanation of why we do blocks, and the nutrients in the soil that feeds the vine is different. We know that the vines, are searching for nutrients and hydration, and the root structure. We're hoping that the root structure is pointing, downwards, and the vines are searching for hydration and nutrients, and it's different from block to block because the soil conditions are different, the water content is different, the water holding capacity might be different, and all of those idiosyncrasies are what make for the uniqueness of a place, right? We talked about this.
Growing grapes in Fresno.
That's it. That's absolutely right. And I think you mentioned it in our last conversation, Trey, about when we dug the soil pits, right? And we were, digging down 12, 13, 14 feet, looking to see what's happening under the ground. What does the root structure look like? What kind of water holding capacity do we have? Is it moist down here, or is it dry? And you and I, in many of those soil pits that we dug together with Michael Benedict, we found incredible water holding capacity, meaning, the vines were going downwards looking for hydration, and that's a very healthy thing for the vine, the root ball and the root structure to be doing to make it for healthy grapes. So
yeah, and that's the goal, and it's not always the case. Sometimes with drip irrigation, we have a really, really great site that was laid out very thoughtfully, and we spent a lot of time and money doing it the right way, and that is carried on day to day with myself, my whole team, Eric Malia and his vineyard team, to make sure that doesn't happen. And it's so cool to go out and see dig down these 6-8 foot deep soil pits right next to the vines, and see the vines going straight down into these different levels of soil to get all these incredible nutrients, which again affect the wine. So 4D for me, I know what you like to say about 4D. If you want to share that, the difference between 4D and Vista Al Rio.
Well, you do your descript. You do your articulate it first, and then I'll use my analogy. How's that sound?
Right.
Or you want me to go first? You go first, I think.
I'll go first. So Vista Al Rio, the wine we just had, it's usually a little more elegant. It usually it has a lot of depth, a lot of elegance, and it definitely gives you a lot of things to search for. You can return to that glass throughout the whole bottle, and it'll always smell a little different, and it'll taste and evolve with time. Whereas 4D, it gives you everything right away. It's very complex, but not very complicated, and it's got a tremendous amount of depth and darker characters on the nose with a lot of fresh herbs and dark fruit flavors, and it's really intense. But how would you describe it?
I think you and I had talked about this earlier when we had the wines open. It's very obvious is not a great word, but it kind of presents itself and says, "Hey, I'm here. Like here I am. I'm here to be enjoyed.
It's an
right,
extrovert.
right. It's an extrovert. I'm right in front of you. Embrace me. Go ahead, drink away. I'm here to be consumed and enjoyed. Right." And I think the analogy that I made between Vista and 4D is CIA versus FBI, right?
Yeah.
Like the FBI guys show up and they've got the hat, it says FBI, and the back of the jacket says FBI, and everybody knows who they are, and it's right there in front of you, and they pull their badge out and say, "We're the FBI." And
4D would be FBI for sure.
Absolutely. And then the Vista Rio is a little bit more like the CIA. You don't know who they are. They're kind of covert, and they're collecting information, and they a little bit more provocative, and maybe a little bit more subtle, but their work is certainly going on. So one's a little more obvious, one's a little bit more quiet, but complete. If that makes sense. I don't know if it's a great analogy. I just thought about it so recently, as you know.
Yeah. Fine Wine is asking about the ageability of these wines, and I think one of the things that we know about La Rinconada and Sanford and Benedict that one doesn't always know about vineyards in California or the New World is we have a good track record of making wines that age really well. It's one of the things that really attracted me to coming here to make wines. Sanford and Benedict was planted in 71. You and I, we've had plenty of those. I've had the 76, the 78, the 80s. They taste beautiful. And although La Rinconada is much younger, I've had several wines from the early 2000s that are holding up really well. Now, not every vintage is going to age for 10 or 15 years, but many of them do. And it's my hope. It's our hope that we make these wines and we kind of thread that needle that you can enjoy them right now, but that if you do cellar them, that you can enjoy them later with time. I think Tammy Kane-Heese is enjoying 2009 right now. So and she's saying they age beautifully, 12 years plus, refuse to open my new ones. Good for you, Tammy. You've got a lot more willpower than I do.
Discipline, right?
Yeah.
So Michelle Garza has asked a great question. I really have to wrap my mind around this one. If you had to say one special sentence or thought about Sanford Pinot Noir, what would it be? And I'm sitting here rolling this around in my head. I mean, there's so many, it's kind of like asking you to describe one of your children in one sentence, right?
Well, I can describe the good one.
What if I had to say one special thing? Golly, to narrow that down. Do you have any thoughts on that, Trey?
Yeah, I think Sanford and Benedict. It's for me. It's definitely a vineyard that looks towards the earth for its influence. It's got a little more structure to it. The flavors that you get are a little more earthy, and not in a negative sense, but certainly a little more, forest floor or mushrooms. It still has plenty of fruit, but whereas La Rinconada definitely gets a lot of its influence from the ocean, and it's not just the soils that are ocean derived. A lot of the weather that it hits are straight off of the ocean, and that was more than one word, wasn't it?
Or it was more than one sentence, but absolutely. But it's okay. It's hard to do. It's a hard question to answer. As I think about this, when I think about the wines when I think about the grapes that we're growing and the wines that we're making at Sanford, I guess I could say what our hope is that they provoke an emotion. You know, it's not just about making wines that taste good, right? If I could say one thing about the wines of Sanford, the Pinot Noir of Sanford, and I think about the different blocks, and I think about the blends, and I think about fermentation, think about punch downs and pump overs, and the things that we taste along the way, and the barrels as they, you know, kind of grow and evolve. The goal is to have wines that provoke an emotion, right? I wouldn't want that we just taste our wines and say, oh, that's delicious, or oh, that's interesting, or oh, it tastes like, you know, blueberries or raspberries or red fruit, or you know, saddle leather or wet dog, right? I would rather have somebody.
Yeah, wet dog would be a bummer.
Wet dog would be a bummer, but I've heard wines described that way, much to my chagrin or surprise. I guess what I would say is the wines of Sanford, the Pinot Noirs of Sanford, our hope is that they cause somebody to stop and pause. That when they put those wines into their mouth, they say, wow, that's different than the three bottles on the three glasses on the left or the two glasses on the right. There's something going on here that's different. And that causes a person to just stop and say, how did this happen? Like,
Right.
where did this come from?
Mm-hmm.
Who made this wine? So I think there's a fair amount of wine, a fair amount of blocks that we have within Sanford that allow us to have the opportunity to cause somebody to pause and say, how did this happen? That's why I think Sanford Pinot Noir and the vineyards of Sanford are so unique. That's just, it's a first try. I might feel differently about it tomorrow, but I think that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, well, we'll pull up the kind of the picture of 4D so people can kind of get a sense of the soil and the site and what the grapes look like. So if you see this compared to the Vista Al Rio, which we showed a minute ago, you can see the soil. It's much darker. It's very dark black as soil goes, and it's much more gravelly. The shale and the marl that you find in this block is much smaller, and there's a little more richness to the soil. But you can see there's a gentler slope in this block. It's not as steep. It's not as exposed to the wind. And also, it's hard to tell in this picture, but the berries are very small. I took this picture this morning, and this selection of Pinot Noir that we have is known for giving us very small berries without any seeds. And so the tannin and the structure of this wine, in conjunction with these soils and that selection of Pinot Noir, it doesn't lend itself to a lot of whole cluster. So we generally never do any whole cluster with this. We always fully destem the fruit for this block. But that's one of the reasons why we get the intensity out of this block. Those incredibly gravelly soils and those really small berries from growing on that site give a lot more skin to juice ratio. So a lot more of the fruit that we get in the fermenter is skin, which is what all the flavor and all the tannins are in, and less pulp. So it gives us a really concentrated, deep, dark, and very complex Pinot. I love 4D. It's got a voice. It's not shy about using it, and it's going to tell you everything it thinks in the first 10 minutes and stick to its story.
You know, Trey, I don't know about you, but as I'm tasting these wines, you know, they've now been open for about an hour. They're changing, right? They're changing pretty dramatically, especially on the nose.
Yeah.
Right. The minerality and the earthiness of the site is really starting to come through now for me. I mean, at the beginning, they're kind of I don't want to say fruity. That's not the right descriptor. They were a little more fruit visible, not fruit forward. And now all of a sudden there's this beautiful earthiness and minerality that's coming out that takes me to the site because of all that rocky, gravelly soil that we have on the site. Do you sense that, or is it just me?
Yeah, no, that's what I love about Pinot Noir. You know, with Cabernet or the other Bordeaux varietals, when for me, and I don't know if you'd agree with this because I don't know if we've talked about it, but when you open a bottle of Cabernet, the real difference for me between the first glass and the last glass is it just seems to get more softer and more elegant. But with Pinot Noir, the first glass of the bottle to the last glass, it might as well be a different bottle. There's so much more of an evolution through the enjoyment, and that's why we're obsessed with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and growing it in this really challenging spot is because grown in the right spot under the right conditions, farmed well and made well in the cellar, you can get a wine that kind of keeps drawing you back. And it can start off smelling like blackberries and fennel, and then now it smells like molasses and iron oxide and all these incredible earthy and beautiful aromas, and the tannins get softer and the length gets longer. Yeah, I love that.
I totally agree with you. It's almost as if Pinot Noir, when well farmed, thoughtfully extracted, carefully vinified, gently and thoughtfully barrel aged, and then put into bottle. It's almost as if over time, over the evening, the volume is turned up, not down.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, they really kind of come into their own.
Yeah, and I got a slide that's kind of shows us through the different steps once we pick the grapes, and so we can see, and so like the bottom left corner, that's us picking the Vista Al Rio at what looks to be about 4:30 in the morning, if I can judge the length of the distance in the rows that we are, and then every step along the process, it's so important to not take anything away from what we've been working so hard to achieve flavor-wise in the vineyard. And so you can see Pedro and Alcides over on the right-hand side of your screen sorting the grapes. So, we pick in the dark. It's all estate fruit. And so what we should be getting at the winery are perfect clusters of Pinot Noir. But still, there's a couple leaves that fall in and a couple random stems and bits from the canopy. So we pull those out, and any imperfect cluster that's not perfectly ripened, we'll trim that cluster and throw that out. And you can see at the top left of your screen, you can see perfectly destemmed, it looks like caviar Pinot Noir. And that's what we start off with. And every step along the way, we're just trying to be very gentle and hands-off and not overstepping our bounds, so that we can have these wines 4 years later and have them be enjoyable, as opposed to kind of like, it's just not there right now.
Yeah, and, you and I have spoken of this many times, right? Man needs to be involved, but not intercede, right? We have these amazing vineyards that are producing extraordinary fruit. They're being farmed well, and then it's our job to highlight that place and highlight all that work that goes on during the farming season, and not intercede, not interfere, not yank the wheel to the left to create some flavor profile. I think it requires an incredible amount of discipline and restraint and confidence, and on your part especially, right? Because you're a winemaker, and I know it's true, right? Because you could go in and put your hands in there every day, right? Like, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and we're going to turn it here, we're going to turn left, and we're going to turn right, and we're going to push this up and push it down. And when I spend time with you during the course of the year, I'm always amazed at the amount of restraint that you have and confidence in letting the wine come into its own.
Well, I made a lot of mistakes in the past 20 vintages, so I there were times where I didn't. So we all learn you only get one time a year, and we learn every time. And I can think back a couple vintages when you're tasting the wines in barrel, and it's kind of like, why didn't I just sit back and let nature take its course? But Rusty, you love the 4D. That makes me so happy to hear. I'll make sure to show up with some in San Diego the next time I'm down there. And these, I should say, we chose these wines, John, because these are kind of divisive wines. I have found in my time here at Sanford that like black licorice. There's either some people that like black licorice and some people that don't. And I've found that Vista Al Rio and 4D are at such opposite ends of the spectrum sometimes. You usually split the room up between people that like Vista Al Rio and people that like 4D. I think it can draw people into two different camps. So we know where you sit, Rusty, and that's good to know. I got plenty of 4D in the cellar for you.
That's awesome. So the other thing that I was thinking about is I was thinking about these, block wines and why we make block wines and showing different places. It's really something that I learned from my brother and I. We learned this from our father. As you think about being a steward of a piece of property like this, it's really not our ideas and our thoughts about what it should be or what it could be are not really as important as what the site actually is.
Right.
And
it's going to give you what it gives you.
Exactly. Right. So, and I know that in all the years that my brother and I and, our family has been, tasting wines with my father and mother and our extended family, we're always trying to identify when a winemaker has truly reflected a place, as opposed to inserting an idea about what they thought it should be, right? And I think about that often when I think about block wines. We have
Right.
Laura Jensen said Vista Al Rio is winning the race here. That's great. I love that. I love when people are comparing them that way. And Leslie, we agree. The Sanford winemaking team is extraordinary. They do an unbelievable job. And from my perspective, and from as far as my brother and father and I are concerned, and our family, they walk on water. This is an amazing group. I know you don't want me to say it, Trey, but it's true. You guys are amazing. It's just when I'm at the winery, I'm at peace. It's wonderful because I feel as if I'm amongst friends, and we're talking about things openly and transparently, and we're making wine. I mean, it just doesn't
It's a team effort.
It is.
It's rare that you have all the things in place. It's great to have a family that gets it, that has made tremendous inroads and investment into this property in the wine industry, and a fantastic vineyard that's going to pay off, by giving beautiful wines and a great team. We have some of the most fantastic people in California. I get to work with them every day. It's great showing up to work with good people.
It's fun. It's a good group of people. It's a fun group of people. I almost, I'm not sure which is more fun, the eating the donuts in the morning, the work that we do all day, or the lunches that we enjoy together, or the dinners at the end of the day where we're drinking wines from all over the world. But all of it's fun from start to finish, from sun up to sundown.
Well, I'm going to put the lunch and the dinner as my top ones. I have less guilt involved than the donuts. So.
Well, we talked about the donuts last time. I just feel like it's always good to start the day with a smile. We're not going to drink wine at 5:30 a.m. So seems to me like donuts make a lot of sense, but I could be wrong. Boy, these wines are really, really divergent right now.
Yeah, it is really fun. I mean, it's not hocus pocus, and that's the fun thing of having a site that has these different soil types and these different weather influences, and it's all Pinot Noir. It's the same grape, and so I'd like to say that at one point it was very complicated to figure out that these two sites were so different, but it really, when you're going through the cellar, when you and I are tasting barrels, it's kind of, you smell your glass and you taste your glass, and we look at each other. It's like, ooh, this is really different. This is really special, and you don't get that unless you have all the pieces at play and getting out of the way.
Yeah. But I do think that they're. Tell me if you sense this. I feel like they're moving away from each other in terms of their intensity, right? Do you sense that at all, or is that just me?
No, definitely I keep saying Vista El Rio reminds me of the ocean, but it does. It's very much going in that realm. It's not dark and earthy. It's definitely more high toned, very spicy. It smells like sea breeze, and it has a lot of those beautiful characters that I would associate with a very mineral Pinot Noir. Whereas the 4D is it's getting richer and it's getting softer and suaver and a little more depth.
It is richer, isn't it? It's funny.
Yeah.
I just see the Vista El Rio is so nuanced and so it has a huge amount of subtlety to it, but it's still amplifying. It's just amplifying in a very different way.
We should be enjoying food with these. What would you have the Block 4D with? What does that call out to you? Because that for me is like heartier dishes. I think one of the guests said they had beef stroganoff, which I would say, yeah, that works really well. And
yeah,
pheasant, game,
viscerally, I think about breadcrumb and mustard encrusted lamb chop. Right, a classic kind of European preparation of a lamb
lamb chop with some mustard and capers,
or mustard and breadcrumbs. Right, I think about on the outside, roasted in the oven. I think this would carry the complexity and the acidic structure of mustard. That's the first thing that kind of comes to mind. Some type of roasted meat, but that with some amplification by way of something like mustard or mushrooms or something like that. It can carry that. It can carry.
It's so good. I could have it with a burger. Cindy, this distinctive aroma with the Vista El Rio. Can you comment on this for my novice nose? Thanks. Of course. And we all have novice noses. I think for me, I've talked about what I thought about Vista El Rio aromatically, but what do you get, John?
So I don't know. Look at when somebody uses the word odor. I view that maybe potentially pejorative versus aroma. So I'd like to know, if you're saying that there's an odor, we talked about this a little bit maybe before you jumped on, that there's a minerality, there's an earthy structure, an earthiness coming through in this wine that maybe wasn't as visible and as present right when we opened the bottle, but then it seemed to be coming forward. So I sense an earthiness in this wine that I find very enjoyable. It's not look, I think about odors as maybe even being stinky, but aromas as being somewhat pleasant. So I'm not sure if I understand your question entirely, but if you want to clarify, I'd love to hear that. Also, let's see, a couple of things here. Answer a question, you'll be able to request blah blah blah. And then Michael Benedict started mentioning something about talking about the one site versus a number of sites. So Michael, if you could clarify for that question for us, that would be fantastic. Tammy's talking about fresh cherries in the we
just got some Washington cherries. Lencho, our longtime 25-year vineyard foreman, just dropped off cherries for us all today that his family members sent him home with. So definitely does. Dan Kessler, do we think the 4D Select clone would perform in the Vista El Rio site? I mean, it would definitely grow, but it's so windy. The 4D that you guys are all enjoying is from Sanford and Benedict, and so it's a little more protected there, a little richer soil, and so it's on a rootstock. The roots underneath the ground are different from the Pinot Noir that grows above the ground, and that rootstock is a little more tame than the rootstock in the Vista El Rio. So I don't think it would work very well we get really, really small berries, almost no yield at all. So it might be so over concentrated because we didn't get very much fruit on the vines in Vista El Rio that it might taste more like, fruit driven and not get as much substance from the earth that we really like.
So, Trey, I don't know if you're reading this, but I'm feeling a lot like Pavlov's dog here. Jens Jensen was talking about a grilled ribeye with a blue cheese salad, and I definitely am salivating a little bit. And then,
yeah, report back, Jens.
Absolutely. And then Cindy wanted to know a little bit about moon phases. Last time we were talking a little bit about moon phases and about how that affects some of the decision making. I mean, boy, that's a big conversation around biodynamic farming, the moon phases, etc. You want to take a little crack at that one before?
No. Yeah, of course. So getting into, I have a chemistry degree and I studied science in school, but I'm certainly not a scientist. Although we're doing trials with some biodynamics at Sanford, we do not farm biodynamically, but we do a lot of work in the cellar and a little bit in the vineyard with the phases of the moon, primarily racking and bottling. And so we'll do these things not because they make sense scientifically, but because my experience over the last 19 vintages has shown me that if we do rack as the moon is waning, and if we do bottle as the moon is waning, then the clarity of the wine will be a little better, and the aromatics of the wine will be a little softer. And there's definitely areas where you can see a correlation. In the lumber industry, oftentimes they'll say that if you fell a tree while the moon is rising, the sap will be rising as well with the gravitational pull of the moon, and so it's harder to cut down a tree at that time of the season. And I don't have any scientific proof for it, but I do have my experience, and my experience tells me that I get a little more compact lees in the barrel when I rack then, and I get a little more aromatic expression in the wine when I bottle then, and so I do it.
So Trey, we're gonna leave a little something for our next webinar, right? I think this is a great topic for the next webinar about the moon.
Yeah, on July 14th on Bastille Day.
Yeah, Bastille Day. I still haven't decided if we're gonna wear costumes or not. We have to decide, whether we. I'm not going to go into that right now. We'll talk about costumes later, but so I think we're going to wrap this. Next is going to be on a Wednesday, not a Thursday, right? July 14th, Bastille Day is a Wednesday, where we'll be on again. And I'm not sure if we've even chosen the wines yet, but we promise you it'll be interesting.
Yeah, we're going to have the Santa Rita Hills Chardonnay, and the I think we might tease out one of our new block designate Chardonnays. From one of the newer selections of Chardonnay from some of our lighter soils in Rinconada. So that'll be fun. I think it's yet to be labeled. So we'll be tasting out of shiners. Unfortunately, we won't be able to offer that to anybody, but we'll be able to tease people about that.
Yep.
And we'll throw in another Chardonnay in there, which it'll be fun because you and I could talk all night and all day about Chardonnay.
Yes, and we will.
Roberta McLean mentioned that the Vista El Rio loses some of the acidity and becomes much smoother as it's exposed to air, and that's I find absolutely a wine kind of comes into itself with a little more time, and definitely these wines require a little time. They're certainly not pop and pours.
Yeah, and then Michael also just came back with a comment. We're going to try and keep this under an hour, so we've got a couple of minutes left here. But Michael said if we placed our block map over Von Romane, we would encompass about 10 Grand Cru vineyards, right? So when you think about the comparisons of Burgundy and their equivalent of block wines or vineyard designate wines, if we took the entirety of the two ranches, Rinconada and Sanford and Benedict, and we placed it over Von Romane, we would cover an area that covered basically about 10 Grand Crus. So that's a great analogy. Michael always prompts me on these things, which is fantastic because it's provocative. That's a great starting point as it relates to why we make block wines, right? So if you think about placing our block wine map, our blocks over the map of Von Romane, and you've got 10 Grand Crus, we believe that we have 10 very specific, very unique, Grand Cru level blocks within our 2 ranches. And it's our responsibility, Trey and I, to show those wines independently and separately as single vineyard wines single block wines and single vineyard wines, because they're so different. We're going to go into a longer discussion next webinar about a Grand Cru versus Premier Cru and how you and I look at our Grand Cru and Premier Cru blocks within the vineyard and how you make the choices.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I know. Look at it's nuanced and it's a little geeky, but look at we're not gonna talk about s'mores, right? We're talking about wine. So, Trey, what do you think? Should we wrap it up for today? How do you feel about that?
Let's wrap it up. Thanks for joining me for another fantastic tasting, and thank you everybody at home. So from the team at Sanford and the whole Terlato family, here's to you and yours. Cheers.
Cheers. Good health, Trey, and good health to all of you. Please come back and join us on Bastille Day, and we love having you along with us. Thank you very much for being interested in our beautiful little vineyard, our little slice of heaven. And thank you very much. And thank you, Trey. Thank you for making this so easy and so enjoyable for me. I really, really enjoy our time together here.
Wow. You did all the work. Thanks, John.
I didn't do anything. Cheers. Cheers, everybody. Bye.